Hi, my name's Donica. On my birthday, I went under anesthesia, trusting my parents would be there when I woke up. They weren't. They left me alone at the hospital during surgery. No call, no explanation, just gone. And what came after? Forged papers, a fake psychiatric file, a family party I wasn't invited tousing my name. But then something happened. A twist no one saw coming. I won the lottery. And I didn't tell a soul. Why would I after everything they tried to erase? What would you do if the people who raised you tried to make you disappear? I woke up early that morning, earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, not yet touched by morning light, and the house sat in that strange, weightless silence that only exists right before dawn. I sat on the edge of my bed, ran a comb through my hair, and reminded myself quietly, so I wouldn't scare the hope away, it's my birthday. I turned 42 today. Not a milestone anyone throws a party for, but still, I thought maybe it would mean something. My parents said they'd pick me up after the procedure, even circled it on the calendar pinned to the fridge back home. I believed them. Foolishly maybe, but I believed them. I packed my overnight bag with the essentials, loose sweatpants, a toothbrush, my copy of To the Lighthouse I never finished, just in case recovery took longer. I even tucked in a little box of the chocolate mints my grandma used to keep in her purse. I'd bought them the day before, hoping they'd sweeten the day, hoping something would. I took a lift to the outpatient center, since Mom said she'd meet me there later. It was cold for late October, the kind of Pittsburgh cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there, even after you came back inside. The check-in process was routine clipboards, signatures, that sterile smell of antiseptic and latex gloves. A young nurse walked me back, her voice calm and cheerful in that overly rehearsed hospital way. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Lying down under those bright lights, I stared up at the ceiling tiles and whispered one last thought to myself. They'll be here when I wake up. When I came to, the ceiling was blurry. The world felt sideways. My tongue felt thick and dry, like it didn't belong in my mouth. I blinked a few times and tried to focus. The voices around me were muffled, floating in and out of clarity. Donica, a nurse's voice called gently. You're in recovery. How are you feeling? I tried to speak but could only manage a nod. My throat burned. Another nurse handed me a cup with a straw. The water felt like heaven. Do you have someone coming to pick you up? She asked, checking her chart. Yes, my parents, I croaked. They should be here any minute. She gave a polite nod, the kind you give when you don't want to say what you're really thinking. Time dragged like a bad movie stuck on pause. I was wheeled into the recovery lounge, surrounded by the rhythmic beep of machines and the low hum of quiet conversation. Curtains separated me from the rest, but I could still hear the mother patients talking to their family members, exchanging jokes, making plans for dinner. I kept my eyes on the curtain, expecting it to pull back at any second, expecting to see my mom's anxious face, my dad's awkward but familiar smile. But all I got was silence. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts, just the same wallpaper, a photo of me and my grandma at the lake, 2 summers before she passed. After an hour, a nurse returned. Still no one? She asked gently. They're probably stuck in traffic, I mumbled, staring at my phone as if I could will a message into existence. Another hour passed, then another. By now, the room had emptied out. Even the man with the double knee brace, whose daughter had been panicking over his pain meds, was gone. I sat there alone in a recliner, my surgical bandage itching against my collarbone, and tried not to cry. The sun had long since set, and someone had dimmed the overhead lights. A new shift had taken over. A cleaning lady rolled in a mop bucket and started wiping down the floors, humming something off-key. I barely looked at her. My body felt like a balloon slowly deflating, the kind that never pops, just shrinks in on itself. She must have thought I was asleep because she turned to another aide and whispered, "They left hours ago." Didn't even ask how she was. Just walked out like she didn't exist. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just let the weight of that sentence sink in. Didn't even ask. Walked out. Like I didn't exist. I stared at the ceiling again. this time with a new kind of clarity, cold and sharp, like glass under bare feet. So this was it. Not an accident, not traffic, not a miscommunication. They had left me, on purpose. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I drifted in and out, never fully gone, never fully here. The mechanical hum of the recovery ward wrapped itself around me like a too-tight sweater. Around 5 a.m., the nurse on duty brought me some plain toast and tea. I nodded in thanks but barely touched either. My body had healed enough to be discharged, but my mind, my heart was nowhere near recovery. I asked to see the billing paperwork, more out of instinct than anything else. A distraction, something to focus on that didn't hurt so much. The nurse handed over a small manila envelope with a receipt tucked inside. At first, I barely glanced at it. Then something stopped me. The name on the insurance card copy. It wasn't mine. Callista, my sister. I blinked. Surely it was a clerical error. A slip of some bored receptionist's finger. We hadn't shared an insurance plan since I was in my 20s. She lived states away, had her own job, her own life, and we hadn't spoken in almost a year. Not since the Thanksgiving call that ended with her saying, "You never know when to shut up and be grateful." But now, here she was on my medical file. "Excuse me," I asked the woman at the front desk, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is my sister listed as the insurance holder?" She tapped her keyboard a few times, her expression neutral. "It was entered during your pre-op paperwork, insurance authorization under Callista Fordham. That's your emergency contact, correct?" "No," I said quickly. "I didn't list her. I listed my mother." I reached for my phone to prove it, but the screen remained dark, battery dead. The woman tilted her head. "It's not uncommon for family to provide coverage, especially when authorization is needed in a time crunch. Maybe she helped out?" "She lives in Connecticut," I replied. "She didn't even know I was having this done." The receptionist offered a polite smile. "You can request an update through patient records." Something in her tone told me she wasn't surprised. I walked away without another word, but inside my stomach burned with a quiet, tightening fire. I found the records office down the hall from radiology. A young man behind the desk greeted me with the same chirpy tone I was growing to hate. He asked for ID, then clicked away at his computer. "I'd like to review my file," I said. "The full one, including any legal documents on file." He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. A few minutes later, he slid a thick folder across the desk. "You'll need to review it in here," he said. "No copies without a supervisor's sign-off." I opened it slowly. The first few pages were nothing routine forms, consent waivers, checklists. Then I saw it. Power of attorney, signed and notarized, in my name. Except it wasn't my signature. Not even close. It was a clumsy attempt at mimicry, something you'd expect from a high schooler trying to forge a permission slip, not from an adult trying to steal someone's legal agency. But there it was, black ink on white paper, a notary seal pressed at the bottom like a cruel joke. I felt the air leave my lungs. They didn't just leave me, they signed me away. The office grew too quiet, too bright. I stood there, unsure of what to do next, when a gentle knock broke the silence. A nurse stood at the doorway, Belinda, I remembered from earlier. She had that kind of face you couldn't forget. Kind, but worn. The kind of woman who'd seen too much and learned to hide it behind polite professionalism. She stepped closer, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. "You should get a copy of that file," she said, her voice low. I was told I couldn't without a supervisor. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she held something out in her palm, a folded scrap of paper. "Take this, quietly. Don't show it until you're off the property." I took it, fingers trembling, and stuffed it into my coat pocket. Her eyes locked with mine for half a second longer than necessary. "There's more going on than you think," she said. "You didn't hear that from me." And then she left, just like that. I closed the file and handed it back, plastering on the same empty smile I'd been wearing since I woke up. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I was focused. If they'd already signed me away on paper, what else have they taken? By the time I made it home, the late afternoon light had already begun to slip behind the row houses. My apartment smelled like stale air and unopened mail. I flicked the light on, And the same soft hum from the fridge greeted me, low and indifferent, like a dog that had forgotten your scent. I slid my keys onto the table and winced as I spotted the stack of unopened bills. They'd piled up while I was gone: hospital invoices, insurance notices, an electricity warning. I was used to scraping by, but this time it felt heavier, colder. I'd been cut open, sewn back up, and discarded like old laundry, and now here I was, returning to the exact same silence I'd left behind. Still in my coat, I reached for my phone. It had finally charged enough to turn on. Missed calls, none. Texts, none. But one voicemail. The timestamp read 2 days ago while I was still in the hospital. I tapped it. A breath. Then my mother's voice, low and sharp, like she was talking through gritted teeth. If you know what's good for you, stay quiet. Let it go, Danica. Don't ruin things for the rest of us. That was it. No hello. No how are you feeling. Just that. I sat down on the edge of the couch, not breathing, letting the words echo in my chest like distant thunder. I played it again, then again. Each time, the pit in my stomach deepened. She knew. They all knew. This wasn't panic or ignorance. This was strategy. I wasn't collateral damage. I was the price they were willing to pay. I deleted the voicemail, but only from my phone log, not from my memory. That voice would stay with me now, like a ghost that refused to leave. I changed into an old t-shirt, made myself some toast I didn't eat, and sat at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop, intending to distract myself with emails, maybe a recipe blog, anything not to feel so cornered. But then I made the mistake of opening Facebook. The first thing I saw was a photo, a backyard strung with lights, balloons, a long table dressed with snacks, gifts, and a cake too perfect to be homemade. A banner hung above the porch that read, "Happy birthday, Callista plus Danica." My heart clenched. There were my parents, my sister wearing a peach-colored dress I knew she'd borrowed from me years ago and never returned, a handful of cousins, an uncle I hadn't seen since Dad's retirement party. Everyone, smiling. I blinked. I hadn't received a single message. Not a call, not a text. And yet, there it was. A party in my honor, without me. The caption beneath the photo read, "Family first, always." I laughed once, sharp and bitter. The kind of laugh that isn't joy, just broken noise. I stared at the photo a little longer. Then I clicked save. They wanted the image of me. The idea of me. Enough to make a cake, pose for a photo, and write my name on a banner, but not enough to actually invite me. That was the moment something inside me stopped grieving. Not because I was over it, not because I forgave them, but because I understood. They hadn't forgotten me. They were replacing me. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Proof. Inside it, I dropped the saved photo, the insurance receipt scan I'd taken at the hospital, and a note to myself to retrieve the voicemail from my cloud backup. I wasn't crying anymore. I was documenting, not because I needed revenge, not yet, but because I needed the truth to have a home, one that couldn't be erased, edited, or twisted. I shut my laptop and stared out the window, watching the dusk swallow the skyline in shades of gray. They think they're writing me out, but I'm the one with the pen now. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay on my side, watching the ceiling fan turn slow, each blade carving the silence like a dull knife. I wasn't anxious, I was calculating. There's something about knowing you've been targeted that forces your brain into overdrive. You think about everything differently. You question every memory, every delay, every time someone forgot to loop you in. When morning came, I poured a cup of coffee I never finished and booted up my laptop. I remembered what Belinda had said. I didn't know how deep this went, but I was done guessing. So I logged in to the legal trust portal my family used. Years ago, our family attorney helped set it up back when things felt more whole, more honest. The login still worked. I navigated to the Beneficiaries tab. There it was. Callista primary and sole beneficiary. Me? Nothing. No secondary. No contingency. No footnote. Just erased. There had been a section for me. I remembered that clearly, like the way you remember which direction a picture used to hang after someone tilts it. But it was gone now, as if I'd never been there. The update date was 6 months ago. And next to it, A digital consent signature. Mine. Except it wasn't. It was a shaky, stretched version of my name, the way a kid tries to copy a parent's handwriting, close enough to fool a stranger. But I knew my own curves and lines. I knew I'd never authorized anything. And the name next to the change? Approved by Lorraine Wyatt, my mother. She didn't even try to hide it. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding like it'd run a mile. They'd taken me off the trust, off my own family's future, without a phone call, without a conversation. I wasn't surprised anymore. I was tired of being surprised. I closed the tab and reached for my phone, almost out of habit. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to see, some apology maybe, a missed call, but there was nothing. Instead, I scrolled through Instagram, a reflex I should have learned to resist. And there she was, Callista, grinning beside a fake, wood-paneled backdrop in what looked like a podcast interview. Her hair was curled, her lipstick too bright for her skin tone, and around her neck, my grandmother's locket. It wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was the one she'd let me wear on my 16th birthday, the one she whispered would be mine someday. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought it was lost after she passed. And now, there it was, resting on Callista's chest, like it had always belonged to her. I zoomed in on the picture. The tiny engraving on the back Marguerite, 1938, confirmed it. It wasn't just the money. They were rewriting the past. And I hadn't even noticed when it started. I shut the app and looked around my apartment. Stacks of old paperwork. Receipts I hadn't thrown away. Birthday cards from 10 years ago tucked in drawers. I started pulling things out every folder. Every piece of mail I'd once shrugged off as unimportant. A pattern emerged. Medical forms that came late. Credit card renewals I never requested. A dental appointment canceled without my knowledge. All little things spread over years. But together, it was a campaign. Not loud, not violent, but methodical. Each move chipped away at my place in the family, my rights, my memories, my proof of existence. By the time the sun dipped again, the coffee in my cup was cold, untouched. My living room looked like a war room. I opened a new encrypted folder on my desktop, labeled it in all caps, Phase 2. And then I started filling it. Legal documents, screenshots, photos, backups, passwords. I wasn't going to confront anyone, not yet. But I wasn't going to be caught sleeping again either. I wasn't collecting ammo. I was building a firewall. They had taken me off paper. Now I was putting myself back on it in places they couldn't reach. They'd made it clear there was no seat at their table for me, so I'd stopped waiting. There's something about pressing save on a folder labeled Phase 2 that changes the rhythm of your thoughts. Not overnight, not in some grand transformation, but gradually, like turning the dial on an old radio until the static fades and the signal comes in clear. By the third morning after the trust discovery, I was restless. Not anxious, just alert. I needed a break. Not from the fight, just from my own thoughts looping back on themselves. So I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I left the apartment without a list, without a purpose, without telling anyone. I ended up at a gas station on the edge of town, the kind with flickering signs, overpriced gum, and a cooler full of mystery sandwiches. I went in for a Diet Coke and came out with a lottery ticket. Impulse, nothing more. The machine near the register blinked red, asking for a zip code. I punched in my old childhood one habit and tucked the ticket in my coat pocket without a second glance. It wasn't until the next evening, after dinner and a shower and another deep dive into my laptop files, that I remembered the slip of paper. I pulled it out. The numbers stared back at me like a dare. I opened the lottery site on my phone, tapped the latest results, and began comparing. One number matched, then 2, then 4. I read them again slowly, all 6. I didn't scream, didn't laugh. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, blinking at the numbers like they were written in another language. $10 million. 10 million. I set the ticket down on the nightstand and walked away. I didn't touch it again that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched. How to claim lottery anonymously in Pennsylvania. That led to articles. Those led to law firms. By midnight, I had an appointment set with an independent attorney downtown, one with no ties to anyone I knew. By 10 a.m. the next day, I was sitting across from a man in a gray suit who who had the kind of voice that made everything sound like a contract clause. He reviewed my situation, then explained how we'd proceed. Blind trust. Assigned trustee. The winnings would be funneled through a structure that protected my identity. No publicity, no headlines, no relatives suddenly remembering me. I listed no next of kin, no beneficiaries, no family. I wasn't building a legacy. I was building a firewall with legs. By the time I left his office, the ticket was no longer mine, not technically. But I'd never felt more in control of something in my life. Back home, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the middle of my living room, unsure of what to do next. Winning that kind of money is supposed to feel like a movie ending. Confetti, cheers, life solved. But for me, it just felt quiet, like closing a door and locking it from the inside. My phone rang around 3 p.m. The name that popped up made my stomach drop. Mom. I debated letting it ring out, but I didn't. Hello? Her voice was tight, clipped, not warm, not surprised. Just, there, Donica. I heard you've been stirring things up again. Belinda said you were asking about records. That's not helpful right now. I didn't respond. You always misunderstood things, she continued. We only did what was necessary. You're too sensitive. You always have been. I stared at the sunlight hitting my windowsill. We were just trying to protect what's best for everyone. You need to let things go. Dragging this out helps no one. Still, I said nothing. There's no need to be dramatic, she added, like she was discussing a leaky faucet. You've always had a tendency to. I ended the call. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I saved the voicemail. I labeled it Mom Justification, MP3, and dropped it into phase 2. Then I made tea. I wasn't chasing apologies anymore. I wasn't asking for space or explanations or crumbs. I had a key to a different door now, and I wasn't waiting to be invited in. The next morning, I woke up with a name in my head and a plan in motion. By 9 o'clock, I was dressed in clean jeans, a dark sweater, and a face that didn't invite questions. I'd found a notary's office a few blocks from my building, nothing fancy. Just a 2-story red brick place wedged between a dry cleaner and a vape shop, the kind of spot no one in my family would ever step foot in. I walked in like I belonged there, quiet, direct. I'm here for access to public estate filings, I said, sliding my ID across the counter. The woman behind the plexiglass looked up. Name? I hesitated a breath before saying, Danica Everett. She tapped at her keyboard, adjusted her glasses, and then frowned. Are you sure you're on this one? She tilted the monitor slightly in my direction. My mother's name, my father's, and Callisto, of course, listed as the sole beneficiary. No mention of me, not even a backup clause. No in the event of or should any other children exist, just Callista, as if I had never existed. Then came the final gut punch, a digital signature. My name, perfectly typed, neatly signed, time-stamped 3 months ago. I stared at it like it might blink or glitch and disappear. But it didn't. Can I get a certified copy of this? I asked, voice steady, throat burning. She nodded, printed it, stapled it twice, and slid it into a yellow envelope. Need anything else? I shook my head, but inside the answer was loud and clear. Yes. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, legs tucked underneath me, staring at the envelope like it might set itself on fire. I finally opened it and laid it flat on the table, right next to the other documents I'd started collecting in my binder. I labeled this one, Tab 3, Full Exclusion. It didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like evidence. I was halfway through bookmarking legal articles on estate fraud when my phone buzzed with a new email. No subject, no name, just, please read this. It's overdue. The sender address was a string of random letters. The body of the message was short, 7 lines. I assisted in your surgery 2 weeks ago. I'm not proud of what I saw. Your family requested prolonged sedation, claimed it was better for everyone if you were kept calm. They didn't want you conscious too early. Didn't want you fighting. I couldn't say anything then. I was new. I was scared. But I've followed your story. I'm sorry. You deserve to know. Burner address. No attachments, no name. I read it twice, then a third time, and then I printed it. I slipped it into the binder, behind the will, and labeled it Tab 4 Medical Interference. This wasn't just betrayal. It was architecture. They had designed this, built it, brick by brick, lie by lie, forged signature by forged signature. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and started drawing a timeline. 3 months ago, forged will filed. 2 weeks ago, surgery, extended sedation. 1 week ago, inheritance scrubbed. Records sealed. Me, removed. They hadn't just taken me off the map, they drugged me unconscious so they could finish the job. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and searched for top estate fraud attorneys in Pittsburgh. I made 3 appointments, then narrowed it to 1. Early the next morning, I met with a woman named Hannah Becker. Late 40s, sharp blazer, no smile. I liked her immediately. I handed her the envelope, then the email, then the medical papers. She didn't interrupt once, just flipped page by page, making notes in the margins with a pen that clicked like a metronome. "This is strong," she said finally. "Is it enough?" "It's enough to start." That's all I needed. I wasn't preparing a confrontation. I was preparing a case. They wanted quiet. They wanted invisible. I was about to become the loudest thing on paper. They tried to silence me. Now they're screaming. I was making breakfast when the knock came, a hard, impersonal rhythm that didn't belong to neighbors or delivery drivers. I peeked through the peephole and froze. A courier in a courthouse vest held up a manila envelope with my full name typed across the front. I didn't open it right away. My fingers hovered over the flap, heart thudding like I'd just run 5 flights. The kettle on the stove clicked off, forgotten. Inside, a petition for mental health evaluation, filed by my parents, signed by 2 neighbors, Barbara and Joe from 3CW who once borrowed sugar and offered holiday cookies, and a psychological affidavit from a Dr. Alan Brenner, a name I'd never heard. The words blurred as I scanned them. Terms like erratic, paranoid, delusional, a list of behaviors attributed to me, half-truths, warped moments, and flat-out fiction. Things I'd said in passing, things taken out of context. One note read, claims of familial conspiracy centered around inheritance. I set the papers down and gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. The fear didn't land first. The rage did. I knew what this was. They weren't just afraid of me talking. They wanted to declare me unfit to speak. It took me 30 minutes to throw on clothes and drive to the only person who might still be on my side. Aunt Moira lived 15 minutes away, in a neighborhood with trimmed hedges and ceramic lawn rabbits. Her porch light was on when I arrived, though it was midday. I rang once, twice. She answered, apron on, dish towel in hand. She looked older than I remembered, tired maybe. But her eyes were sharp. She didn't step aside to let me in. "Donica?" she said, voice soft. "I figured you'd come." "I need help," I said. "They're trying to commit me." Her lips thinned. She didn't look surprised. That stung more than I expected. "Come in for a minute," she said, turning her back. I followed her to the kitchen, the same lemon-scented warmth from my childhood still lingering. She poured tea without asking. I didn't drink it. "They're worried," she began. "I'm not unstable," I snapped. "You know that." She sighed. "Honey, they said you've been acting erratic, digging into things, making accusations. What was I supposed to think?" "You were supposed to remember who raised me," I said. "Who I've always been." "Not what they say now." She placed her hand over mine. "Maybe just comply. Get evaluated, clear your name the right way. I'm not giving them the power to rewrite my mind, Moira." She pulled her hand back. "I love you, but I can't go against the whole family." That was it. The only branch that hadn't snapped gone. I left without finishing my tea. By nightfall, I was in my apartment with every lamp on, every curtain drawn, binder open on the floor. I called Hannah Becker and told her what had arrived. She asked for scanned copies. By morning, she had filed a counter-petition with a full psychological profile, attached dates, logs, licensed therapist verification. We backed it with every audio file I'd recorded since the first voicemail. No outbursts, no paranoia, just strategy. But logic wouldn't be enough. Truth was never loud unless you gave it a speaker, so I gave it one. I searched my inbox until I found a message from a local investigative journalist named Rochelle James. She'd once emailed me months ago about a story on elder abuse, asking if I'd known anyone affected. I never responded. Now I typed, "There's a woman in Pittsburgh being declared mentally unfit so her family can seize her assets. She's sane, she's got proof, but they're using forged psychiatric records to silence her. I can't give you names, but it's real. If you want a lead, look up filings from the Everett family. The daughter's story is the one no one expected." I hit send. No attachments, no signature. Just a breadcrumb. Let someone else dig now. Let the shadows shrink under exposure. I wasn't hiding. I was watching them panic. They thought pushing me into silence would make them safe. They were wrong. I woke up before dawn, heart steady, hands calmer than they'd been in weeks. The courtroom hearing was scheduled for 10. I didn't touch my phone, didn't scroll, just got dressed, printed the files, and zipped them into a weathered leather folio I hadn't used since my teaching days. As the city yawned awake, I watched steam rise from my coffee, barely sipping it. I'd spent the past 7 days working like a woman possessed, pulling every thread, backing up every file 3 ways, and finally, securing something that made my breath catch when I watched it. A grainy hospital surveillance video, 3 weeks old. I'd requested it through a third-party service on a hunch. Buried in the footage was the time-stamped moment my parents wheeled an empty chair out of the post-op exit ramp alone. No discharge papers, no escort, just the two of them walking briskly through the underground garage, eyes down like they were stealing something, because they were. Me. Frame by frame, I studied their posture. Dad's jaw tight, Mom clutching her purse like it might explode. No sign of confusion, no hesitation. They knew what they were doing, and they didn't care if anyone saw it. That clip, silent and cold, was my shield. I arrived at the temporary courthouse just before 9, slipping into the modest waiting room where my lawyer, Hannah, sat reviewing notes. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual. No small talk. She simply nodded and gestured for the flash drive. "Ready to make them sweat?" she asked. I didn't smile. I'm ready to be done pretending they ever told the truth. Inside, the judge reviewed the psychiatric filing first, the one claiming I was emotionally unstable, prone to paranoia, detached from reality. Then Hannah rose. "We'd like to enter Exhibit A into evidence," she said, voice clear but never raised. The lights dimmed. The clip rolled. Every eye in the courtroom followed the wheelchair's lonely path through that parking lot. I heard someone behind me mutter, "Is that it?" As if they expected more. That was the point. It was simple, but irrefutable. Then came Raina. She appeared on the screen via live Zoom, seated in a neutral-toned room with a medical ID badge clipped to her chest. The same eyes that once looked at me with quiet empathy now held a different kind of fire. "I was the nurse assigned to Danica Everett's post-op recovery," she said, steady. Her parents asked to be alone with her. When I returned 10 minutes later, she was gone. They told me she'd been discharged early, but no form had been filed. She paused. I also found this note, left on the tray table. She held up a scan. My name, written in blocky, uneven scrawl. I believe it was forged. I knew her handwriting. This wasn't it. Gasps echoed across the room. Then came the overlay. Timestamps from the footage. The hospital's discharge logs showing no official release. Raina's internal report 1 shed filed quietly that day. But that had mysteriously disappeared from the system until she submitted a printed copy last week. The judge looked up slowly, eyes unreadable. "Enough," she said. The family's petition was denied on the spot. An emergency motion was filed to investigate potential medical misconduct and inheritance fraud. The room buzzed like a hive cracked open. I sat motionless. No fist pump, no glare toward the defense table where my mother, father, and sister sat like mannequins. I just breathed. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I opened the voicemail folder. There were over 50. I listened to just one from last year. My mother's voice saying, "Don't overreact, Danica. You always do this. You always push people away." Then I hit delete. And the next one. And the next. Until they were all gone. No backup this time. I sat on the balcony as dusk rolled in, letting the noise of the city melt into the hum of crickets and a neighbor's soft music from an open window. No more filing. No more evidence. Just breath. The truth had been spoken, and I didn't have to shout it anymore. I don't belong in their silence. Morning found me without an alarm. I didn't need one anymore. Not since the noise had gone quiet, not in the world, but in me. 3 weeks had passed since the hearing. 3 weeks since the courtroom tilted, and gravity shifted back to where it always should have been. I'd moved. Nothing extravagant, just a second-floor walk-up on the east side. The walls were still bare, boxes stacked in corners, a new kettle on the stove. But the silence here was different. It didn't press down on me. It didn't ask questions or whisper doubts. It just let me breathe. Then came the headlines. Woman silenced by family uncovers forgery scandal. Hospital abuse and legal power. The Everett case opens national dialogue. No photo, no interview, just facts. They never printed my face. I never gave them a quote. But the internet did what it always does. It filled in the blanks, memes, hashtags, comment wars. Some believed I was a martyr. Others said I must have been dramatic, manipulative, or mentally unstable to provoke such betrayal. But the facts were the facts. My name was no longer theirs to erase. The court dismissed every claim. The judge's gavel didn't echo, it landed like punctuation. My mother, once a fixture at every charity gala, quietly resigned from all her boards. My sister lost her rights to the inheritance and was served a formal request to repay improperly accessed trust funds. She moved back to Connecticut. No statements, no lawsuits, just retreat. They didn't fight, because the truth was heavier than any lie they'd constructed. A small settlement was offered. Damages, emotional distress, public slander, financial obstruction. I signed the papers, but declined the check. Instead, I had it redirected to a new entity I'd been building in the quiet hours between sleep and sunrise. The Second Voice Foundation. A space for those erased on paper but still screaming in silence. We started with a website. Then came calls. Then Raina joined not as a witness this time, but as a partner. We hosted workshops for nurses about how to identify family coercion. We helped patients apply for protective documentation. We partnered with 2 other legal teams, and before summer's end, we had filed 4 separate cases on behalf of victims across the country. No billboards, no viral videos, just help. Quiet, steady, and real. Then one morning a letter arrived. Cream envelope, familiar handwriting. I opened it on the counter, coffee steaming beside me. It was from my mother. 1 page. A strange mix of apology and defense. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed, she wrote. I didn't understand your silence, so I tried to fill it. With plans, with decisions. I see now that it only pushed you further away. I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll understand I was trying to protect our name, not destroy you. There were no tears. I read it once. Then I placed it into the fireproof box under my bed, the one where I kept important documents. ID, titles, court papers. It belonged there, not because I needed it, but because one day I might need to remember how far I'd come. Forgiveness doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like distance with dignity. That afternoon, I sat with Raina in our new office space, a secondhand desk, 2 chairs, and a whiteboard already full of ideas. We were preparing for a press inquiry when a volunteer peeked in with an envelope. Someone dropped this off. Said it was from a former patient you helped anonymously. Inside was a note. Your silence saved me. Thank you for screaming when I couldn't. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my journal, and looked out the window at a sky no longer gray. Maybe I'll never get the apology I wanted, but I got something better. I got my voice back. Before we close this chapter, let me say this from one voice to another. If you've ever been pushed to the margins, made to feel invisible in your own story, I want you to know, silence doesn't mean surrender. It can be the breath before the breakthrough. I learned that you don't need anyone's permission to exist fully, or to stand up when the world tries to write you out. What matters most isn't who left you behind, but who you become once you decide to stop waiting and start building your own place in this world. In the end, I didn't get the apology I used to cry for, but I got clarity, I got strength, and I got something no one can take away from me again, my voice. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been silenced, underestimated, or left behind by someone you trusted? What did you do with that pain? What would justice look like to you if the apology never came? If this story touched your heart, Drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't quite hit home for you, I'd still love to hear why. Was it the story, the message, the way it made you feel? Your thoughts matter, just like your voice. If you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, and rooted in truth, go ahead and hit subscribe to the channel. Let's keep building a space where voices don't disappear, they grow louder, stronger, and more connected. I'll see you in the next story.
Hi, I'm Mayella, and if you've ever been betrayed by the people who swore they'd protect you, maybe you'll understand. At dinner, just a regular Sunday dinner, I got a text. No name, no emojis, just, leave now, don't drink. I didn't listen fast enough. Mom smiled as she served my favorite juice. Dad refilled my glass twice. My sister raised a toast, and later they lifted my hand while I pretended to sleep to unlock my phone, and that's when I knew. This wasn't just manipulation, it was a strategy. But why would your own family treat you like an ATM? What happens when you finally catch them in the act and record every word? Would you turn them in? Would you walk away? Would you survive it? It had been nearly 6 months since I last walked up the porch steps of my childhood home, but nothing had changed. Not the creaky third step, not the wind chime Vera had hung near the door back in '98, not even the faint smell of cinnamon and pine sol that clung to the entryway like a memory. Wethersfield hadn't changed much either. It was late fall, the sun barely grazing the horizon by 5:30, and the trees lining the sidewalks had already given up their leaves. I paused at the front door, bracing myself, then rang the bell, even though I knew it was unnecessary. Vera opened it with that same half-smile she always wore when she wanted to appear warm. "You made it," she said softly, stepping aside. "Would have been rude not to," I replied, managing a polite smile. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The living room looked exactly like I remembered. Lace curtains, outdated photo frames, and a large mirror that hung just slightly crooked. Cassian stood in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room, arms crossed, nodding like we were business associates rather than father and daughter. Seraphine? She was already perched at the table, perfect as always, hair curled just right, lipstick never too much, scrolled casually through her phone with a finger adorned in more rings than fingers. "You're late," she muttered without looking up. "Traffic," I lied. The dining table was already set. Candles flickered in the center, casting soft shadows across the old wood. My chair had been pulled out for me. The place setting was exact: silver fork, white napkin, and a glass of cranberry juice already filled. "Still like cranberry, right?" Vera asked from behind me. "Sure," I said. I hadn't touched the stuff in years, but it wasn't the time to start an argument over juice. I slid into my seat, watching the way Seraphine glanced up from her screen just long enough to register my presence, then immediately looked away. Cassian poured himself a splash of wine and offered none to me. Habit, probably, or intention. It was hard to tell with him. "So," Vera began, "how's work?" "Busy. Good, though," I replied. I had this part down. Say just enough, smile, and deflect. "That tech job still holding up?" Cassian asked, eyes narrowed. "Still holding." Seraphine giggled softly. "I saw a TikTok that said tech jobs are the new pyramid schemes. You better cash out before they collapse." I smiled. Didn't respond. It wasn't worth it. Not anymore. We were halfway through passing the mashed potatoes when my phone buzzed in my lap. I wasn't expecting anything. No one texted me during family dinners. I glanced at the screen beneath the table, thumb grazing the corner of my phone. A message. Just 2 lines. "Leave now. Don't drink." There was no name, no emojis, no punctuation beyond that final period. It felt like a voice in my head trying to sound calm when it was actually screaming. I swallowed carefully. My hands were steady, but I felt a drop in my stomach, a cold, sudden drop. I looked up. Vera was pouring gravy over chicken, Cassian buttering a roll, Seraphine still scrolling. Everything looked completely normal. Too normal. I glanced at my glass of cranberry juice, deep red, with a couple of small bubbles near the top, the kind I used to drink when I was 13, watching Saturday cartoons before chores. I didn't remember anyone asking what I wanted to drink. It was just there. "You still like cranberry, right?" Vera asked again, as if repeating it would make it true. Yeah, I said. My voice felt far away. My pulse kicked up. I reached for the glass, lifted it an inch, then set it back down. This was either the most twisted prank or something was very wrong. Seraphine raised her own glass. To family, she said, smiling like a woman in a shampoo commercial. Always there when you need them. Cassian lifted his To strength. Vera's smile widened. To unity. I raised mine slowly, carefully, and clinked it against theirs. But I didn't drink. I watched the way their eyes flicked to my hand, then back, the way Vera's smile didn't reach her eyes, the way Seraphine blinked just once too slowly. Something was off. I turned to Vera. Bathroom? Same place as it's always been, she replied, tone just sweet enough to taste sour. I pushed back from the table, stood, and walked upstairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached the top, my hands were shaking, not with fear, but with certainty. In the hallway, I passed the old photo wall. Me and Seraphine in matching sweaters, my high school graduation, Dad's retirement party. All framed, all staged. I stepped into the upstairs bathroom and shut the door behind me. Locked it. Stared at myself in the mirror. There was a time when I would have laughed at a text like that. A time I would have rolled my eyes and drank the juice anyway. But not tonight. Not after the things I'd started to piece together over the past year. The time my bank alerted me of a login I didn't make. The birthday gift that mysteriously never arrived, though Seraphine swore she mailed it. The weird way Vera asked for my new passcode, just in case something happened. I pulled out my phone again. Reread the message. Leave now. Don't drink. And I knew, deep in my gut, in the place that always knew before I let it rise to the surface, I knew exactly who had sent that text. The lock clicked into place with a soft, deliberate sound. I took a breath, slow and shaky, and leaned my back against the bathroom door, giving myself a moment before I moved. The message was still on the screen. I didn't need to read it again. I already knew what it said. I also knew who sent it. The moment I saw the wording, short and sharp like a command whispered through clenched teeth, I had no doubt. Iran. It had been years since I last dialed his number. I'd deleted him from my contacts after our breakup, more for show than necessity. His number lived in my memory like a song you didn't ask to remember, but couldn't forget. I tapped call before I could second-guess myself. My hand trembled as I held the phone to my ear. 1 ring, 2. A soft click. You're still there? His voice was quieter than I remembered, raspier maybe, but I recognized it instantly. Aaron, I whispered. A pause. Maella. The weight in his voice was real, familiar, but heavier. Neither of us asked how the other had been. There wasn't time. And frankly, this wasn't about us. You need to get out of that house. Do not drink anything. Don't sleep. Don't trust them. My pulse jumped. Why? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Aaron exhaled, the sound tight, almost pained. I should have told you earlier. Back when we were still together, I didn't know how to say it. Say what? He hesitated again, and I could feel him battling something. Shame? Regret? Anger? Your mom, Vera. She installed tracking software on my phone. I didn't move. I barely breathed. What? It was during the holidays. She said it was a safety precaution. I believed her. Your dad once asked me if I'd ever considered joint accounts. Said it was a sign of commitment. And Seraphine, she wanted to test a banking app on my device. Said she didn't want to mess up her phone. Every word came with a new throb in my temples. You never told me. I was stupid, he said. I thought they were just being overprotective. I figured it was just their way of showing love, in that twisted, suffocating kind of way. But then I started seeing logins I didn't make. Notifications disappeared. Transactions I didn't recognize. When we split, I assumed it was over. But a few weeks ago, I overheard something. What did you hear? Someone I know. She works in security at a bank. Seraphine came in, used a business account that wasn't hers. She was trying to recover access to someone's login. She used your name. My knees buckled slightly, and I sank to the edge of the bathtub, phone pressed to my ear like it could hold me upright. Aaron, I whispered. Are you sure? Yes. That message I sent, it wasn't just a hunch. I pressed my free hand to my forehead. My skin was cold, clammy. The cranberry juice I hadn't touched felt like it was already poisoning me from a distance. They're planning something, Maella. I don't know what, but I know that look. I know how it starts. They smile too much, say all the right things. But everything around you, every moment, it's manufactured. My voice cracked as I asked, You think they're trying to access my bank? I think they're trying to control you again. And if they can't control you while you're awake, they'll find a way while you're not. The words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they fit too well. Thank you, I said. He didn't ask for anything in return, didn't apologize. He just said, Be careful, and hung up. I stared at the wall for a moment before opening my notes app. I started typing. Time, 5:58 p.m. Text received. Warning confirmed. Then I wrote down what everyone had said, word for word, as best I could remember. You still like cranberry, right? Remember when you used to fall asleep at dinner? To family. Every sentence now felt like a trigger. I kept typing. Then I stood, washed my face with cold water, and looked at my reflection. My hair was pinned back neatly, my eyes, focused, not frantic, but underneath the surface, I could feel it. Something was shifting. There was a time, not long ago, when I would have gaslighted myself, told myself I was being dramatic, accused myself of always assuming the worst, but not anymore. Too many patterns, too many slips. Like the time in college when my phone kept dying, even though it was at 40%. Or the time my Venmo showed payments to someone I didn't recognize, only for them to magically refund it after I mentioned it aloud at dinner. Or when my tax return vanished from my account for 48 hours and reappeared with a transfer reversal I never authorized. Little things, dismissible things. But now, strung together, they painted a clear picture, a deliberate one. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from clarity. They've done this before, to me. I opened the camera app, took a picture of my reflection, just for myself, just to document the moment before everything changed. Then I saved the note, backed it up to cloud storage, and tucked my phone into my jacket pocket. I wasn't going to cry, not here, not now. If they tried anything tonight, I'd be ready. I'd already been through the emotional ambush. I wasn't letting them get a second swing. I took one more breath. Adjusted my posture, straightened the line of my coat, then I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped into the hallway. Each step down the stairs was slower than the one before. My hand grazed the wooden railing, familiar and worn. I heard Seraphine laughing softly. Cassian's voice floated up, low, smooth. Vera was humming again, probably plating dessert like she hadn't just engineered a digital crime scene. As I approached the dining room, I felt the eyes before I saw the faces. They turned. Smiles. Innocent. Casual. But I'd already seen beneath the skin. I pulled out my chair, lifted the glass of cranberry juice, smiled, and then I raised my glass toward Seraphine. Cheers, I said, voice even, to family. Her eyes searched mine. I didn't blink. The glass never touched my lips. I smiled at Seraphine, held it up like a silent toast, and set it gently back down. I didn't need to drink to play the part. I just needed to watch, listen, and remember. Conversation floated around the table like it was riding on strings, light, casual, perfectly composed. It was too smooth. The kind of smooth that took rehearsal. Cassian made some offhand remark about potholes in town. Vera chimed in about the neighbor's kid getting a scholarship. Seraphine giggled when Cassian mispronounced quinoa, like this was just a normal dinner, not a trap. I answered questions with brief, polished replies, smiled when appropriate, nodded in rhythm. But underneath, every part of me was working, scanning every word, every twitch, every shift in tone. I wasn't just present, I was documenting. Vera turned to me mid-bite, her fork paused delicately in the air. "You've always been so sensitive to alcohol, haven't you, sweetheart?" She said it like it was trivia, like we were flipping through old stories, warming ourselves by nostalgia. My stomach tightened, but I didn't flinch. Cassian jumped in with a chuckle. "Remember that holiday party?" "What was it? Sophomore year? You had half a beer and passed out in the laundry room." Seraphine leaned in, resting her chin on her hand. "You sure you're okay to drink tonight?" The way she asked, it was laced with sugar. But I tasted metal. This wasn't conversation. It was construction. They were laying bricks for a narrative. Mayella is fragile. Mayella is careless. Mayella passes out when she drinks. And if something happened tonight, they'd just point back to this dinner. She always had a low tolerance. Remember college? We were worried about her. I let the comments hang in the air, not pushing back, not validating, just listening. But inside, I was flashing back. 2 years ago. Christmas week. I'd flown in late, and Vera had insisted I come to dinner, even if I was tired. She poured me a glass of red wine, one, that was all I had. We'd talked about Seraphine's job, Cassian's new lawnmower. It all blurred now. But I remember waking up the next morning in my childhood bedroom, fully dressed, my phone dead, no recollection of getting there. At the time, I chalked it up to exhaustion, jet lag, stress. But a week later, I'd noticed a $2,000 wire transfer to a consultant I didn't remember hiring. I'd assumed it was some app glitch. I even filed a dispute, but it got reversed. Authorized by fingerprint. No investigation, no follow-up. I let it go. Now, sitting here, with this same cranberry juice staring at me like a dare, I realized I hadn't passed out. I'd been put down, just like they were trying to do now. Same setup, same lighting, same music humming from the Bluetooth speaker. Vera never knew how to work until Seraphine helped her set it up. This wasn't improvisation, this was protocol. I slid my hand discreetly under the table, texting myself. 6:41 p.m., cranberry poured before arrival. 6:43 p.m., low alcohol tolerance comment from Vera. 6:45 p.m., reinforcement from Cassian, follow-up by Seraphine. I snapped a photo of the table, my untouched glass, the angle of the chairs, the untouched dessert plates. If they were trying to bury me again, I'd leave footprints all over their polished wood floors. I glanced across the table, caught Seraphine looking at me. She smiled. Just her mouth, not her eyes. "Hey, remember that time we got locked out of the house and you cried for like an hour?" she said, suddenly. Vera gave a maternal sigh. She's always been the emotional one. Cassian didn't speak. He rarely did, unless it served a purpose. That silence of his wasn't ignorance, it was strategy. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. The venom in their words wasn't even about tonight, it was about rewriting my history in front of me. So when they pulled the final trigger, no one would suspect a thing, not the police, not the neighbors, not even my own brain, if I'd been knocked out again. They'd say I was always this way, fragile, overworked, dramatic. The tragedy is, I'd believed them before, but not anymore. I pretended to check my phone again. Just a glance at the time, it gave me cover. I tapped open my notes again, documented every sentence, tucked the phone into my jacket pocket, screen recording still running in the background. Seraphine raised her glass, smiled that rehearsed smile, and said, "To sisters, old memories and new beginnings." Everyone echoed the sentiment, like they'd all practiced it. I clinked my glass against hers, leaned slightly forward, and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Here's to endings they never saw coming. The toast lingered in the air for a second too long, like smoke that didn't quite know where to drift. I could feel Seraphine's eyes on me as I set my glass down again, untouched, same as before. The smile I wore stayed on my face, but it had grown tighter at the corners. I hadn't planned to make that final line sting, but when it left my lips, I didn't regret it. The moment passed and laughter resumed, albeit slightly more brittle than before. Dessert arrived, a tray of small lemon bars and chocolate mousse in plastic ramekins Vera insisted were just as good as the glass ones. As she placed a dish in front of me, I felt a tug at the hem of my sleeve. "Hey, Auntie Maella," came a small, eager voice. I turned. Seraphine's daughter, Chloe, 6 years old and entirely too observant, stood next to me, crumbs already dotting the corner of her mouth. "Mommy said you fall asleep fast," she whispered with the sweet conviction only children possess. "Like last time, when Grandpa had to get your phone 'cause you were too sleepy." A pin dropped. That's what it felt like. The room didn't stop outright, but it paused, just for a breath. Vera's hand gripped the tray a little tighter. Cassian coughed into his napkin. Seraphine's face froze before she forced a light chuckle. "Chloe, honey, go get your book from the sofa," she said in that sing-song tone meant to redirect a child before they blew up a carefully laid plan. Chloe blinked. "But Now," Seraphine said more firmly. The little girl trotted off, confused but obedient. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't need to. That was all I needed to hear. So this wasn't the first time. Of course it wasn't. And they hadn't just done it to me. They'd talked about it, normalized it enough that a 6-year-old could repeat the script. They taught her the lines. The bitterness in my mouth had nothing to do with the dessert. I picked up the spoon, stirred the mousse without tasting it, and let my thoughts sharpen. Later, as I took a short walk to the kitchen for water, I paused by the doorway. Voices carried easily in this house, especially the ones not meant for me. "She thinks she's better than us now," Seraphine said in a sharp whisper. "I know," Vera murmured as she stirred something, a ceramic spoon clinking against the mug. "Just let her feel smart. She always thinks she's above this family because of that office job. Let's see how smug she is when we're done tonight," Seraphine added, tone coated with syrupy disdain. I didn't step into the room. I didn't interrupt. I slid my phone out from my pocket, pressed record, and angled the mic just around the corner. My fingers didn't tremble this time. When I had enough, I walked back into the dining room and smiled like I hadn't just heard my own sister planning a personal dismantling. So it wasn't just about money, it was about control, erasure, humiliation, maybe even revenge for something I couldn't pinpoint. Childhood jealousy, misplaced rage, a script where I refused to play the dumb, grateful sibling. Whatever it was, it had teeth. Back at the table, the mood had shifted again, forced joy over awkward tension. Seraphine was scrolling through her phone, pretending not to be rattled. Cassian sipped coffee like it could shield him from judgment. Vera acted like she hadn't been stirring poison into a plan minutes ago. I played along, laughed at a joke Cassian half told, asked Vera about the garden I knew she hadn't touched in months. I kept everything on the surface. But below it, I was drawing lines. Drawing blood. Quietly. When I finally caught Seraphine stepping away from the table to answer a work call in the hallway, I followed. Not immediately. I let a few minutes pass, then slid into the hallway like I was just going to the restroom. She was standing near the console table, eyes glued to her phone. "You got a second?" I asked, voice calm. She looked up. "Sure." I stepped a little closer, not confrontational, just enough. "I don't know what you're planning tonight," I said, keeping my tone even. "But I want to make something really clear. If you cross a line, I won't be the one who forgets." Seraphine tilted her head, smile twitching. "Still so dramatic, Maella." "Maybe, but at least I've learned how to spot an ambush before I'm under the table." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. I added, "Let's see who writes the final scene." Then I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for her to reply. I knew that smile of hers would return the second I turned my back, the one she wore whenever she thought she still had the upper hand. From the kitchen, I heard Vera call out, "Dessert's ready!" As I walked toward the dining room, Cassian was already refilling my glass. I watched the liquid swirl in the cup, thick and slow, same as before. They just smiled, as if my warning was a bedtime story, something nice to ignore before taking what they wanted. Cassian refilled my glass without looking at me, and Vera set down the apple pie with that same rehearsed warmth she'd worn all evening. The aroma should have triggered comfort, flaky crust, cinnamon, butter, but it didn't land like it used to, not tonight. I watched her hands as she served each slice, calm, meticulous, too calm, too careful. They were choreographing my fall, down to the garnish. "Your favorite," Vera said, smiling as she slid the plate in front of me. "Thank you," I replied. My voice was smooth, controlled. I matched their act note for note. Across the table, Seraphine raised her phone. "Let's take a picture," she said, lifting it up with practiced ease. "One for the group chat." I gave a light laugh, the kind that passed for agreement without true enthusiasm. We all leaned in. Cassian placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. Vera adjusted her scarf. Seraphine held the camera high and counted down like we were kids again. 3 clicks later, she smiled at her phone, tapped a few buttons. "Sending it now," she said. "Don't worry, Mayella, I'll find your best angle." I didn't respond. I knew exactly what that group chat was now. After a few minutes of fake laughs and polite bites of dessert, I excused myself. "Phone's dead," I said casually, holding up my screen. "I need a charger. Is the study still open?" "Of course," Vera said, too quickly. "Same drawer as always." I walked down the hallway to the room that had once been Cassian's office, now a half-used storage space for tax folders and the dusty home printer. The lamp near the desk still had the yellowing shade I remembered. On the far end of the bookshelf, the old Google Nest Hub blinked faintly to life, and that's when I saw it. When I moved out, I never logged out of the family Nest account. I'd forgotten, honestly. Until now. I tapped the screen. Inbox. Still synced. I opened the message history. Group thread. Family first. 3 participants. Vera, Cassian, Seraphine. My breath caught. "Just remember to tilt the phone for the fingerprint. We missed it last time. Make sure she drinks at least half. She blacks out quick. Don't overdo it. Cass, charge the extra phone and keep it in your pocket just in case." I felt like I was watching a documentary about myself, except I was the unknowing subject. I tapped quickly. Screenshot, screenshot, scroll, screenshot. I forwarded the images to a hidden email I kept for legal purposes, logged out of the account, and hard reset the device so it would appear untouched. Then, I tucked the charger under my arm and walked back toward the dining room, slower than I needed to. I needed to center myself before stepping back into that theater. They didn't notice my absence, or at least, they pretended not to. That was the game, after all. If no one names the crime, no one is guilty. I set the charger on the end table, plugged in my phone, then slid back into my seat, composed. They hadn't counted on me being 2 steps ahead. They thought they were orchestrating this evening, but they forgot I'd been raised in their symphony. I knew every note, every pause. They trained me for this without realizing it. "So," I said, folding my napkin, "how's the new security system working out?" Cassian raised an eyebrow. "Fine. Why?" "Just curious," I said with a shrug. "You know, with all the syncing and recording these days, things have a way of being remembered." Seraphine's hand twitched. Vera smiled, but her fork paused mid-air. I took another bite of pie, chewed slowly, then added, "Funny how tech never forgets, even when we do." There it was. The flicker in Seraphine's eyes, the millisecond where she dropped the mask and something calculating darted behind her stare. She covered it well, but not fast enough. Cassian reached under the table to check his phone. Subtle, but I caught it. My phone was already recording audio through a background app. Anything said tonight, whispered or muttered, would be documented. They wanted to gaslight me. They wanted to recreate a version of me they could dismiss, but now the record would outlast the performance. I leaned back in my chair, glass in hand, and gave the room one last sweeping look. Vera cleared her throat. "You haven't touched your drink, Mayella." "Oh, I will," I said lightly. "Just waiting for the right moment." "Don't let it get warm," Cassian added. "It's better cold." I smiled. "You'd know." And then, I clinked my glass against Vera's with a soft cheers. Still didn't drink. Seraphine was staring now. Not with warmth, not with guilt. With calculation. She knew I was onto them, and now she had to guess how much I knew and how fast she had to act. Cassian's phone buzzed again under the table. He silenced it quickly, almost too casually. I turned off my phone screen and slipped it face down beside my plate, letting the mic continue in silence. Let them think I was done resisting. Let them believe I was tired. Vera leaned toward Seraphine. "Do it now," she whispered, too low for anyone else, but not low enough. I blinked slowly, feigned the heaviness of exhaustion. "I think I'm just going to rest here for a moment," I murmured, my voice trailing off. Vera touched my shoulder gently. "Of course, darling. You've had a long day." The lights felt dimmer, the air cooler. A hush settled over the room, like the last breath before a plunge. I eased into the armchair near the fireplace, eyes half-lidded, letting my head tilt slightly. My breathing slowed. I felt fingers curling around my hand, and then the phone vibrated once. The moment my phone vibrated in my palm, I knew the plan had worked. That tiny buzz, subtle, specific, was the confirmation I'd set days ago. The vibration meant one thing. The recording had begun uploading to my cloud storage. Quiet, seamless, undetectable. Just like everything else I'd prepared. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. My breathing stayed steady, chest rising and falling like someone on the edge of sleep. But my mind was racing, alive with every sound, every whisper in the room. A blanket was draped over me. Vera's hands were as gentle as ever. To anyone watching, she was just a mother tucking in her daughter. But I knew what was coming. "She's out," Seraphine whispered. Her voice was clipped, almost bored. "Let's get this done," Cassian replied from somewhere near my feet. Then came the sound, the soft swish of cloth, the faint click of my phone being picked up. A pause. "Here it is," Seraphine said. "It's not locked." "No, it is," Cassian answered. "Still needs her fingerprint." Then I felt it. Fingers curled around my wrist, light, careful. My hand was lifted slowly, then my thumb was pressed against the home button. Click, unlocked. My phone vibrated again, almost imperceptibly. Another signal. The screen had been accessed. The mic was still on. The evidence was collecting itself. "She keeps everything under banking," Vera said, like she was discussing what aisle to find flour in. "It's always been the same pattern." Cassian's voice was closer now. "Routing number?" "Got it," Seraphine murmured. "Only 8,000. That won't raise flags." 8,000. I'd paid off debt with less. I'd lived off less. And here they were, treating it like a safe withdrawal from a family fund they thought they deserved. "Get her hand again," Vera said. "We need to authorize the transfer." They lifted my thumb once more, used it for authentication. No passwords, no codes, just flesh and trust. "Done," Seraphine whispered. "She won't even know." "She always blacks out anyway," Cassian added. "She'll think she made the transfer herself." There was silence after that, a kind of shared exhale. Relief. That's when I realized. They'd done this before. And not just once. This was procedure to them. A strategy. A tool set refined through time. My heart was pounding, but my limbs stayed limp. I had trained myself for this moment. I felt a touch on my shoulder. "You okay, honey?" Vera's voice was back to soft concern, back to mother mode. I stirred slightly, let out a low sigh, then opened my eyes halfway. "I think I blacked out for a sec," I said, my voice gravelly, barely above a whisper. Vera bent closer, brushing hair from my face. "Oh, sweetheart, you probably just got dizzy. Low blood sugar, maybe." "Yeah," I nodded slowly. "Maybe that's it." Cassian handed me a glass of water. Seraphine hovered nearby, lips pursed in mock worry. "I should go," I mumbled, starting to rise. They didn't protest. Of course they didn't, because as far as they knew, the job was done. "I've got work early," I added, blinking like someone still disoriented. "Let us walk you out," Vera offered. I waved it off. "No need, just thank you. For dinner." Everything was memorable. They smiled, all of them. And for the first time that night, I realized something strange, something terrifying. They didn't feel bad. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. This wasn't betrayal. It was just maintenance to them. Just a way to smooth over whatever imbalance they thought I'd caused by not doing enough, not giving enough. They'd rewritten the family code so often that they now believed stealing from me was something I owed them. At the door, Vera hugged me lightly, patting my back. "Text us when you get home, all right?" I nodded. Seraphine held me a second too long. "Rest up, okay?" she said. "You're always pushing yourself." Cassian didn't say a word. Just gave a firm nod, then turned back toward the kitchen. I stepped outside into the evening chill. The driveway was dark, quiet. I walked to my car slowly, still feeling the residual hum of their hands on mine. Once inside, I started the engine, locked the doors, and stared straight ahead. I didn't drive off immediately. I waited. The phone buzzed again. Upload complete. The audio file was now in 3 secure cloud accounts, 1 USB backup hidden in my work drawer, and 1 email draft addressed to a trusted lawyer, ready to send with a single tap. My hands were steady now, my breath even. I whispered to myself, not because I needed reassurance, but because I wanted the moment to be marked. Now, let's see what silence sounds like when it's turned into evidence. The living room was still wrapped in quiet when I stepped inside my apartment. The streetlight outside cast a soft orange glow across the hardwood floor, and for a moment, I stood there in the doorway, keys dangling in my hand, still wrapped in everything that had just happened. I shut the door slowly, locked it twice, and let the silence settle around me like a second skin. I didn't turn on the lights. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, dropped my keys on the counter, and opened my laptop. It booted up faster than usual. Or maybe I was just impatient. I slid my phone from my coat pocket, plugged it in, and opened the cloud app. The audio file was already there, time-stamped, crisp. I put in my earbuds, pressed play, and listened. Vera's voice came through first, hushed but clear. "She always blacks out." Then Seraphine. "We just need her thumb. She never remembers anything." Cassian. "Only 8K. She'll think she transferred it herself." I paused the audio. Sat very still. The truth was one thing when you suspected it. It was something entirely different when you heard it played back to you in your own family's voices, like a true crime documentary, except you were both the subject and the producer. I felt hollow. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. I had suspected this kind of betrayal for years, brushed it off, swallowed it down, tried to rewrite it in softer language. But hearing it now, cold, deliberate, like they were listing ingredients on a recipe card, it changed everything. I closed the audio file and opened my banking app next. I already knew what I was looking for. 2 years ago, Christmas Eve, I filtered transactions by date. There it was. Withdrawal, $2,000. Time, 11:41 p.m. Label, online transfer, verified by biometric. I stared at the screen, let the numbers burn into my eyes. I didn't make that transfer. I had blacked out that night after 1 drink, just like tonight. I had woken up in my old bedroom with a dead phone and no memory, and apparently with a lighter bank account. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't stress or fatigue. It was a system, a process, and I'd been trained to excuse it. I sat back in my chair, let the air move through me, cold and steady. After a moment, I reached for my second device, a tablet synced to the smart home camera at my parents' place. Another thing they forgot I still had access to. I logged in, pulled up the archive footage from tonight, skipped to 5:42 p.m., just before I arrived. The video showed Vera standing by the door, glancing over her shoulder, then her voice, faint but captured by the ring mic. "If she asks, say it was just a family prank." That line broke something open in me, not because it was new, but because it was rehearsed. They already had a script for the fallout. They were ready to gaslight me before I even stepped inside. I closed the app, exhaled, then I got to work. Opened a clean spreadsheet. I titled it, Timeline of Incident, Mayella V. In one tab, I uploaded the audio. In another, the bank screenshots. In a third, the video file from the doorbell. I drafted an email. 3 recipients: Fraud Department, Brookstone Bank, Officer L, Carmichael, Weathersfield Police Department, Financial Crimes, PR@stratusreputation.com. Seraphine's firm. I didn't attach my name. I used a secondary address I'd registered months ago for emergencies. The subject line read, "Unauthorized financial activity and biometric exploitation. Full evidence attached." I included every file, time-stamped, tagged, clear. Then I clicked send. No hesitation, no rage, no drama, just silence. Clean, surgical silence. The kind that didn't scream, but settled in deep and stayed. I left the laptop open and walked to the window. The breeze from outside cut through the quiet, crisp, and honest. My phone buzzed. Notifications. I didn't look right away. I waited. Then picked it up. Group text. Family first. Seraphine. Did you actually record us? Cassian. You're being irrational. Vera. This will ruin everything we've built. I blocked the thread. Individually, too. Each number. Each name. I would not respond. There would be no explanation. No, you misunderstood. No, it wasn't like that. No, let's talk. They had spoken enough. I had listened enough. And now, they would listen to silence. My email pinged. Your file has been successfully delivered. I looked down at the screen, then stepped back to the window, opened it wider. The air rushed in, cool and clear, as if the whole world had been holding its breath and was finally exhaling. I watched the wind move through the leaves outside, brushing over everything like a reset. I didn't destroy my family, I whispered. They did that themselves. I just handed them the mirror. It took less than 36 hours for the first wave to hit. The audio file I had quietly uploaded, clipped from the night of the dinner, was no longer mine alone. Now, it had a life of its own, bouncing across inboxes and server logs, making its way into meetings and behind closed doors. I had planned it that way. Quietly. Cleanly. I didn't need a courtroom. I needed exposure. Seraphine was in the middle of a morning debrief at her firm, Stratus Reputation Management, ironically, when it happened. They were halfway through reviewing a proposal for a high-profile tech CEO when someone pressed play on the file I had sent. Just get her thumb. That line played loud and sharp through the conference room's audio system. No warning, no context, just that sentence, followed by Cassian's gruff voice. She always blacks out. Phones lit up. Laptops paused mid-slide. I imagined the sudden tension, the chairs shifting, the silence choking the air. Her boss, I'm told, didn't say much. Just looked at her and said, "You should take the rest of the week off." She didn't finish the meeting. While that was happening, I was on the phone with my bank. "I need to report biometric misuse," I said, calm and composed. The fraud specialist on the other end asked, "And you have documentation?" "Yes." Audio confirmation, timestamps, and transaction logs. Within an hour, I had submitted the forms, attached the files, and initiated the freezing of all accounts that had ever been linked to any family member's access. Joint savings from years ago, gone. Secondary login recovery paths, eliminated. I filed for a no-contact order under financial harassment. My lawyer helped expedite it. By that afternoon, I had also updated every layer of my digital footprint. New phone number, secure cloud backups, facial recognition only on devices, and a full freeze on my credit, just in case someone got clever and tried to open a line of credit under my name. The relief didn't come in a rush. It came slowly. That night, I slept 8 full hours, no disturbances, no cold sweat, no nightmares of childhood dinners and warm smiles hiding sharp intentions. It was the first time in years that sleep felt like sleep. The consequences were not immediate for my family, but they began to grow roots. In town, people talked. That's how it goes in places like Weathersfield. Word got out, not details, but rumors with enough truth to make people uneasy. Vera's former students, now adults, many of them, whispered in staff lounges. Cassian stopped showing up at his favorite diner, where he used to sit near the front window and argue about politics with the same 2 guys every Tuesday. No more warm greetings from the waitress who always brought his coffee without asking. And Seraphine? Well, Stratus didn't fire her, but she was placed on indefinite administrative leave. A reputation manager with a reputation problem. I hadn't sent the files to ruin their lives. I sent them because I refused to let them continue ruining mine. That night, a string of texts came in before I blocked the numbers. Seraphine, you made it worse than it had to be. Vera, we're still your family. This could have been private. Cassian, we raised you. This is how you repay us? I responded only once, not to grovel, not to explain, to say exactly what they needed to hear and what I had waited too long to say. You drugged me. You used me. That's not family. That's criminal. Then I blocked them all. No second message, no call, no exception. In the days that followed, I avoided the grocery store near their side of town. I skipped the bookstore Vera used to volunteer at. I rerouted my commute so I wouldn't have to drive past the church where we used to do Sunday potlucks. But I didn't feel like I was hiding. I felt like I was choosing myself. That weekend, I stood outside a small building I had just signed for. A quiet space on Maple Street, formerly a law office, now empty, with good bones and a solid roof. My key slid easily into the lock. Inside, the walls were bare. The light smelled faintly of dust, but it had potential. The new sign was being installed that day. Reset, recovery for financial abuse survivors. The man on the ladder gave me a small wave as he drilled into the brick, the metal letters gleaming under the afternoon sun. I walked up the front steps, one slow foot at a time, not because I was tired, because I was grounding myself, claiming this space, every inch of it, not for revenge, for restoration. Inside, I ran my hand across the empty counter where someday women would sit and fill out forms for assistance, for guidance, for hope. I imagined community workshops, quiet therapy sessions, conversations over tea, a place for people like me, like I had been. I didn't need my family's apology. I needed this. A room with windows wide open, light flooding in, not locked bedrooms where phones died mysteriously. This was my beginning. No more shame, no more silence. No more pretending I didn't see what I saw, know what I knew. I wasn't running anymore. I was rebuilding. On my terms. The scent of fresh paint still lingered faintly in the air that Saturday morning as I unlocked the front door of Reset. The sign above the doorway had only gone up yesterday, the letters still glossy and new. Recovery for financial abuse survivors. It wasn't flashy, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no press, just a quiet beginning, on my terms. Inside, the walls were calm shades of warm gray and soft green. The front desk, though modest, held a printed card with our mission. Silence kept them safe. Your voice will set you free. I stood in the entryway for a moment before flipping on the lights. Sunlight spilled in through the window panes, stretching long across the hardwood. It was peaceful, earned. The first volunteers arrived just after 9, a social worker named Kendra, a retired therapist named Elaine, a woman I met at the bank who'd once been forced to co-sign a credit line she never used. They unpacked pamphlets and set up folding chairs in the back room, talking softly with that kind of steady, practiced patience people only develop when they've lived through hard things. By mid-afternoon, I had already met 3 women who cried when they realized this wasn't a scam or a handout. It was real, a place built because someone believed them before hearing a word. I didn't tell them my whole story. I didn't need to. I had built this place for them. Later that evening, after the last volunteer left and the lights dimmed down to a glow, I returned to the small office tucked at the back of the building. It was the same room that used to be my childhood bedroom, now with bare walls and new flooring. The desk was simple. A single framed photo sat on it, an old one of me at 8 years old, sitting under a maple tree with a book in my lap. Beside the desk was a narrow shelf lined with reading material. I'd started adding books slowly, most of them donated. I reached into the bottom drawer of the file cabinet and pulled out a small cardboard box I hadn't opened since moving in. At the bottom, beneath a stack of old journals, I found a photo frame I had once shoved under my bed to forget. It was a childish drawing, on crumpled paper, edges yellowed by time. 2 stick figures, me and Seraphine. We were holding hands, both smiling, with big hearts drawn above our heads. In red crayon, I had written, "Me and my best sister, forever." I stared at it longer than I expected. I didn't cry. I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her either. I set the drawing upright on the shelf between two books. Not to honor her, not to erase what happened, but because that little girl who drew it once believed something so deeply, so earnestly, that I owed her the space to be seen. I didn't need to rewrite the past. I needed to face it. A few days later, a letter arrived at the center addressed in slanted handwriting I didn't recognize at first. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of yellowed stationery, the kind people used to write with when letters mattered. "Mayella," it began, "I knew something was wrong the first time your mother did the same thing to me. I was younger then. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the nerve to call it what it was. But you did. I've watched from afar, always afraid to speak. But not anymore. You've done something bigger than confronting them. You've opened a door, and for that, I'm proud of you." It was signed simply, Aunt Ruth. I held the letter for a long time, not because it changed anything, but because it gave weight to the silence that had stretched across generations. She had never intervened before, never said a word, and now, decades later, she was telling the truth the way she could. It was enough. The next week, I prepared a stack of envelopes. Each contained a USB drive, no letter, no explanation, just the truth, the recordings, the screenshots, the dates, the voices. I sent them to every cousin, aunt, and uncle who had once praised Seraphine's ambition, who'd said I was too sensitive, or not family-oriented enough, or difficult. I didn't send it to shame them. I sent it because if anyone was still choosing to look away, they deserved to see what they were refusing to face. Most never replied. Some blocked me. But one cousin, a woman named Elise, who had stood beside Seraphine at her baby shower and once called me cold, texted me late one night. "I believe you," she wrote, "and I'm sorry." That was enough. Vera, Cassian, and Seraphine never reached out again. They disappeared from my life, not through some dramatic exit, but like furniture you quietly get rid of. No fanfare, just absence. They didn't apologize. They didn't ask to make amends. And that, too, was enough. Healing wasn't a clean arc. It didn't show up one day and say, "You're done." It crept in slowly, through small victories, through quiet moments like sitting in a room you'd reclaimed and realizing your breath didn't hitch every time you heard footsteps. I still had days where I didn't trust people's smiles. I still double-checked my bank notifications more often than I wanted to admit. But I was no longer waiting for permission to feel safe. I had built my own security. That evening, I stood by the front window of Reset as the sun began to set, golden light pouring across the floor like a promise. Outside, a woman stood nervously on the sidewalk, mid-40s, holding a tote bag like it was a shield. Her fingers were clenched tightly around the strap. I saw something in her eyes I recognized instantly. Fear and exhaustion woven into resolve. I opened the door. She stepped inside. I offered a smile that wasn't professional. It was personal. "You're not alone anymore," I told her, voice steady. "Let's begin again." Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones hidden behind family photos and polite smiles. Mayella's story is more than a revenge story. It's a reminder that silence can be deadly, and loyalty, when misplaced, can cost everything. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace, only to realize you were sacrificing yourself? Let me know in the comments. And if this story hit close to home, don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw stories just like this. Your voice matters here.
Hi there. My name's Larissa. And this was supposed to be just a will reading. But instead, my own family laughed when they announced I was left with nothing, not a cent, not even my name in the will. They called me unfit, said I abandoned them. But the worst part? They planned it, together, long before I walked into that room. And just when I thought I had no voice left, my daughter stood up and said 7 words that made the whole room fall silent. The air inside my mother's parlor room felt like the kind of silence that precedes a tornado. Skylar squeezed my hand as we stepped inside, her fingers smaller than I remembered. Darlene was already seated at the center of the long oak table like a judge waiting to pass sentence. Her smile wasn't warm, it was practiced, like she'd been rehearsing it in the mirror all morning. The smell of lemon polish mixed with tension. My Aunt Irene gave me a once-over and didn't bother hiding her disapproval. Some cousins nodded, but it wasn't kindness, it was protocol. This wasn't a family reunion. This was a verdict. Holcomb, the family lawyer, shuffled papers as though he hadn't already made up his mind about me years ago. I caught his eyes, neutral but not kind, and took a deep breath before finding a seat at the end of the table, far from Darlene's perfectly manicured hands and laser-focused stare. He cleared his throat. "To Darlene Doyle," he began, "goes the primary residence and all its assets." Darlene didn't even blink. Of course she knew. She always knew. To Irene Doyle, a monthly stipend and antique heirlooms of Ramona's choosing. I didn't flinch. Not yet. I had braced myself. Then Holcomb flipped a page and paused, only for half a second. "And to Larissa Doyle, nothing." The sound of my name followed by silence hit harder than any slap. The room stirred with whispers. Someone laughed quietly, probably one of the cousins who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. Darlene leaned in just enough for only me to hear her. "Guess Mom finally cut her losses." Skylar's hand clenched mine tighter. I gave her a soft smile to shield her from the humiliation bleeding out of me like an open wound. My jaw tightened. I didn't look at Darlene. I couldn't. If I did, I might lose the control I'd worked so hard to keep. Then came Irene. "I mean, really? What kind of mother walks out and thinks she can just walk back in? That's not how family works." I didn't answer. I stayed still, let her words hover like flies. Darlene smirked and turned her gaze toward Skylar. "Poor girl. You deserve better than this woman. We all tried, but she chose to run." I snapped my head toward her, but stopped short of speaking. "Not here. Not yet. You came for the truth," I reminded myself. Not for their approval. Not for scraps. I kept my voice inside, swallowed the anger, and placed my free hand on Skylar's back, grounding myself in her warmth. Holcomb flipped the next page of the will. The sound echoed too loud in the still room. Darlene leaned toward me again and whispered, sharp as broken glass, "Mom made sure people like you disappear, and she did a damn good job." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. But my mind wasn't still, not after hearing her say it like that, with such satisfaction. I could feel Skylar shifting beside me, sensing the shift in me, sensing the heat crawling under my skin. Holcomb cleared his throat again, louder this time, but I noticed the slight hesitation in his fingers as he turned to the next page. A flicker of doubt? Or just nerves? I couldn't tell. But in that second, something clicked. He used to golf with my ex-husband, every other Sunday. They shared drinks, cheap advice, and complaints about their wives. I had forgotten that, buried it under years of survival. Now here he was, holding my name in one hand and my erasure in the other. Darlene leaned back in her chair like she owned the building. Her voice was syrupy and smug. "Since Larissa clearly wants to be part of the family again," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we might as well address the elephant in the room." She turned toward the door and nodded once. It opened, and in walked Miss Kellis, Skylar's old kindergarten teacher. I hadn't seen her in years. "This is a bit unconventional," Darlene added with a laugh, "but it's important to understand patterns of behavior." I sat straighter but said nothing. Miss Kellis gave me a polite nod, then looked around the room. Yes, I was Skylar Doyle's teacher. I remember her well. Sweet girl. But her mother was difficult to reach. She missed multiple meetings, left Skylar with neighbors often. At times, it felt like Skylar raised herself. The air thickened. Irene nodded like a church deacon backing a sermon. A few cousins leaned in, hungry for more. Holcomb stayed quiet, eyes on the carpet. Skylar looked at me, confused. I didn't look away. I couldn't. They were using my past as a weapon, but they didn't know the full story. She remembers one version, I thought. I lived the other. Back then, Skylar had asthma attacks weekly. I worked night shifts to pay rent on a one-bedroom apartment with a heater that barely worked. I made peanut butter sandwiches stretch 2 days. I kept her breathing, clothed, loved, even when my own mother shut the door in my face. I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I stood, walked over to the pitcher, poured Skylar a glass of water, and returned. My face was unreadable. My silence wasn't shame. It was strategy. The noise in the room dulled. They were expecting tears, a tantrum, a crack in the armor. But I gave them nothing. That, more than any outburst, made them uncomfortable. The room stayed still, but I could sense something shifting, like when you're standing on a dock and feel the tide pull beneath the planks. Holcomb tried to move on, but Darlene wasn't finished. She stood slowly, folding her arms, her voice loud enough to hush the whispers. "We're not just talking about morals anymore," she said. "We're talking theft." My chest tightened. She took money from Mom, asked the bank. Gasps, one soft curse from the back, and then silence. Irene didn't hesitate to pile on. There was an account that went negative out of nowhere. Thousands gone. We stayed quiet, for Mom's sake. She didn't want it public. My throat dried, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Holcomb glanced at me, then back down. That silence said enough. Darlene handed him a bank printout like it was a bomb wrapped in fax. "Here, 2016. Withdrawal. $4,000. Labeled household expenses." I didn't need to look. I remembered the day. The line at the pharmacy, the motel parking lot, Skylar's fever, the inhaler I couldn't afford. But they'd stripped all that away. Context erased. "She drained the account, then ran off," Darlene continued. "Let's stop pretending this is about grief." One of the cousins murmured, "Guess she cashed out before the will was even cold." No one laughed this time. They were watching me too closely, waiting to see if I'd break. I blinked, and I was back there again. It was raining hard. My ex slammed the front door after screaming so loud Skylar woke up gasping. She was 2. I wrapped her in my coat and drove, shaking the entire way. I pulled into Mom's driveway, knocked. She opened the door, looked at me, and then passed me like I wasn't there. "You left your vows," she said flatly. "You don't belong here." Then she closed the door. That night, I kept Skylar warm in the car, parked behind a Waffle House. I used the last of my tips to buy gas, baby formula, and cough syrup. 3 weeks later, I got my first paycheck from the nursing home. That money? It bought us time to survive. It didn't come from greed. It came from desperation. Back in the room, I met Darlene's eyes and smiled, not kindly. "Tell them what you spent Mom's inheritance on in 2018, I said, voice steady. "Or should I?" Darlene didn't even blink. She let out a short theatrical laugh that bounced off the crown molding. "Oh, please. We all know you love throwing mud when you're cornered." She turned to Holcomb and raised her voice for effect. "And I'll have my attorney file an injunction first thing Monday if this little circus keeps going." It was classic Darlene. When truth got too close, she threw legal smoke. Irene stood, not missing a beat. "This isn't about legacy anymore. This is about protecting the family from slander and shame." She looked around the room like she expected applause. All she got was more silence and a few eyes darting away. I stood slowly. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "If I wanted to sling mud, Darlene," I said, "I'd start with your second mortgage. Or maybe the wellness retreat in Arizona you wrote off as elder care while Mom was in the hospital." A sharp inhale rippled through the room. Even Holcomb froze for a beat. Darlene's expression cracked for just a second, then snapped back into place. "You're bluffing." I stepped toward the table. "Try me." Skylar shifted closer to me. Her fingers brushed against my arm, but her eyes didn't leave Darlene. I didn't let up. "You want to drag this into court? Fine, let's take it there. Just don't pretend you control the story anymore." Holcomb cleared his throat, loud this time. "Let's all stay civil. The estate proceedings don't need to become litigious." Darlene leaned toward Irene and whispered, "She thinks this is over. She has no idea what's coming." I heard it. Without turning, I said calmly, "Keep pushing, Darlene. You won't like what happens when I push back." That got her attention. She stood, slow and deliberate, and met my eyes with something that almost looked like respect, but not quite. Her voice dropped to a simmer. "Then push, sis." For a second, we just stared at each other, 2 sisters locked in a decades-long war, now face to face at its ugliest hour. The room had gone so quiet, even the ticking of the antique wall clock sounded like a drumbeat. Then came a voice I didn't expect. "Grandma said this would happen. Watch this." I turned just in time to see Skylar rise from her chair. She stood tall, her chin slightly trembling but her voice clear. She walked calmly toward her backpack, unzipped it, and pulled out a small envelope. The silence cracked. Skylar stepped toward Holcomb and handed it to him with both hands. He looked at it like it might explode. The name across the front was written in my mother's handwriting, sharp, precise. Underneath, "Play only if things turn ugly. If Larissa is hurt, this means it did." Darlene shifted in her chair. Irene's jaw tensed. "Where did you get this?" Holcomb asked gently. Skylar looked at me first, then answered. "She gave it to me after our last walk. She said I'd know when it was time." Holcomb peeled the flap open, revealing a USB drive and a folded note. He read the message again, slower this time. A hush fell across the room like fog. Darlene let out a forced laugh. "That could be fake." Holcomb raised one brow. "It's real. I recognize her handwriting, and per her instructions, I'm legally obligated to play it if this exact circumstance occurs." I couldn't breathe for a second. My hand instinctively reached for Skylar's. She squeezed it, steady, unshaken. "I trusted her," Skylar whispered to me. "She said the truth would outlive everything else." I nodded, barely able to speak. Darlene opened her mouth like she had something ready to strike, but for once nothing came out. Holcomb moved to the TV stand, pulled the small laptop from his bag, and inserted the USB. He adjusted his glasses and clicked the file. The screen blinked to life, blue light flickering across the faces of every person in the room. And then there she was. My mother, older, frailer, dressed in the sky blue cardigan I'd given her 2 birthdays ago. Her eyes looked straight into the camera, tired but certain. "Hi, Larissa." Her voice filled the room like thunder before the rain. "If you're watching this," my mother began, "then I'm gone. And if Larissa's in the room, I know exactly what's happening." No one moved, not even Darlene. On screen, Mom sat straighter, her frail shoulders wrapped in the navy sweater I gave her before her last hospital stay. Her hands were folded in front of her, a tissue clenched tight between them. "I believed the wrong people," she said plainly. "I didn't listen to the right one. I let pride become parenting. I let other voices drown out my own daughters." The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the laptop. The storm outside had crept closer. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the window. "Larissa," she continued, "I know I hurt you. I know you tried. And I know I made it harder than it had to be. But I saw what you did for Skylar. I saw how you kept going, even when no one believed you should." I blinked away the sting in my eyes. "I changed the will." The air snapped like a rubber band. "I left the house to you and Skylar, the savings, and I started a college fund in her name." There was an audible inhale from the couch. Darlene looked like someone had slapped her. Irene leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Holcomb, calm as ever, reached into his briefcase and placed a new folder on the table. This was signed and notarized 2 weeks before Ramona's passing. I witnessed it myself. Darlene shot up from her chair. She wasn't of sound mind. "She was lucid," Holcomb replied firmly. Her physician confirmed her capacity in writing. "Would you like to see the document?" I didn't speak. I turned instead to Skylar, brushing a curl behind her ear. "She saw us," I whispered. "Finally." Skylar smiled, and for the first time in hours, I let my shoulders relax. Darlene didn't sit. She leaned toward Irene and hissed low enough that only I could hear. "Then we destroy whatever she thinks she just won." The moment the screen went dark, Irene stood and walked briskly to the hallway. I could hear her heels click against the hardwood floor, sharp, urgent, like she was calling in backup. Minutes later, she returned with her phone held out like a weapon. "Dr. Myers on the line," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Ramona's physician." Holcomb looked up, eyebrows pinched. "On speaker, please." The voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes, this is Dr. Meyer. I was Ramona Doyle's primary physician during her final year. In that period, she occasionally demonstrated confusion and mild short-term memory issues, common in late-stage patients." Darlene pounced. "So, just to clarify, doctor, you're saying she wasn't fully capable of making legal decisions?" A beat. It's not that simple. She had moments of full lucidity, but that nuance didn't matter. There it is, Darlene declared, like she'd won the lottery. That second will is trash. It's invalid. She didn't even know what she was doing. Holcomb didn't move, didn't speak, but I saw it, the quiet clench of his jaw, the tightening of his shoulders. He was calculating. Then Darlene took it one step further. And while we're here, she tossed a manila folder onto the table. Let's talk about Larissa's past, since we're pretending she's some model of integrity. Inside, credit reports, missed payments, student loan defaults, a 2017 eviction. She wants a house? Darlene sneered. She couldn't manage a studio apartment. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Skylar stared at the table, her small fingers gripping her dress. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't lash out. That was survival, I said quietly. You don't know what it means to start over with a toddler, no help, and $26 in your account. Irene rolled her eyes. Excuses. Holcomb cleared his throat. Credit history is not a measure of moral character, Miss Doyle, and this isn't a financial tribunal. But I wasn't done. I turned to the room. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I've never stolen, never lied to this family, never begged for more than a sliver of decency. But I see now, you only ever respected silence or submission. I did neither. That struck. For the first time, the cousins shifted uncomfortably on Darlene's side. A few avoided eye contact. Then Skylar stood. She looked at me first, then at the room. You forgot what she's survived, she said, steady and sure. But I didn't. The room didn't move. Not a breath shifted. Rain had begun ticking lightly against the windows, as if the house itself held its breath with us. Skylar took a quiet step forward. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn children's book. Corduroy. It had been her favorite when she was little. Now it was something more. She handed it to Holcomb. There's something inside, she said softly. Holcomb opened the cover and found a folded piece of pale yellow stationery tucked in the middle. His brow furrowed as he unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Dated 4 weeks after the video, he announced. To Skylar. He began to read. If they hurt your mother, show this. She is the strongest woman I know. She did what I couldn't. She left when I was too afraid. I regret not standing by her sooner. Holcomb's voice caught. He looked up. No one spoke. This isn't just about inheritance, it's about justice. The weight of those words flattened the room. Some cousins shifted away from Darlene. A few looked down at their laps. Irene sat stiff, her jaw clenched, though her hand trembled in her lap. Darlene snapped, Anyone can write a note and date it. It doesn't prove anything. Holcomb folded the letter with care. The ink matches Ramona's pen. The signature is hers. It's authentic. Irene tried to rise, but her knees buckled. A cousin helped steady her. No one else moved. I stood and looked at Darlene. Not with fire, not with gloating, just finality. You weren't trying to protect Mom's memory, I said. You were trying to protect your version of her, the one who never changed, but she did. Darlene didn't answer. Her hand twitched like she wanted to speak, wanted to fight, but there was nothing left to say. Holcomb cleared his throat. Per Ramona Doyle's revised will and supplemental evidence, all assets transitioned to Larissa Doyle. No gasps, no applause, just the rustle of paper and the sound of Darlene's heels crossing the hardwood as she picked up her folder, turned toward the door, and walked out. Irene followed. Slower, heavier. Skylar settled back beside me. Her hand found mine again. You did more for me than anyone ever has, I whispered. She looked up and smiled. She trusted me. Holcomb adjusted his glasses and glanced in my direction. There's just one more thing to sign, if you're ready. The morning air inside the house felt too still, like the walls had exhaled after holding their breath all night. Light filtered through the curtains, dull and quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence I remembered growing up here. This one didn't come with judgment. It came with peace. I moved slowly through the rooms. My hand grazed the old hall table, where a dusty crystal bowl still held faded peppermints. The hallway smelled faintly of Ramona's favorite lavender spray. I stepped into the living room. No voices, no glares, no watchful silence, just space. I lowered myself into her chair, the one she never let anyone else use. For the first time, I didn't feel like an intruder. I sat back, let my fingers run along the soft armrest, and let the grief come. Not loud, not angry. Just there. Real, whole. Later, Holcomb knocked gently before entering. He held a manila folder in one hand, coffee in the other. "It's all official," he said. "Just needs your signature." I took the pen and paused. Did she know what this would cause? He looked down, nodding once. She didn't care. She said it was time something was finally right. After he left, Skylar came in with 2 mugs of tea. She set one beside me and curled up on the couch, legs tucked under. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her. This child, this small, strong soul who held the line when no one else would. "You weren't just brave," I said. "You're the reason I kept standing." She shrugged gently. "I just said what needed saying." "Exactly," I whispered. "That's more than most grown-ups ever do." Outside, rain had stopped. The trees stood wet and quiet against the window panes. No more storms, just aftermath. We spent the rest of the day packing, not to erase the house, but to gather what mattered and leave what didn't. I didn't think of Darlene or Irene, not with anger, just nothing. I knew they'd never say sorry, but I also knew their silence didn't get to define me anymore. Skylar handed me a box marked photos. Inside, I found a picture of my mother, young, smiling, holding baby me. I didn't cry. I smiled back. She hadn't left me the house. She gave me my voice back. Before we close this chapter for good, there's something I want to leave with you, not just as the woman in this story, but as someone who walked through the fire and made it out standing. Sometimes, the justice we wait for doesn't come from courtrooms or signatures. It comes when we're finally seen, fully, without apology. For years, I thought silence made me strong. But strength, real strength, is choosing to speak when your voice shakes. It's standing tall, even when everyone's waiting for you to fall. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or told your story didn't matter, let this be your reminder. It does. You matter. You don't have to win the whole world over. Sometimes, you just need to hold your ground long enough for the truth to echo back. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been made to feel like your voice didn't belong in the room? What did you do? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something in you. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And hey, if this story didn't sit right with you, I welcome that too. Let me know why. Let's keep this real. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that speak to the cracks and courage in all of us, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that button so you don't miss what's next.